All right. So welcome everybody. While you're waiting, if you haven't already, you can jot down these two codes, workshop 50 and workshop 2mo. And the first one is going to save you $50 off of your first month if you choose to pursue Instrumentl. The second one is going to save you an additional month off of your annual plan. And those are both in case you decide to pursue an Instrumentl subscription in the future. All right. So without any further ado, we're going to be talking today about how to prioritize your prospect list in under 60 minutes. Okay. So most people have already done this, but if you haven't already, go ahead and share your name, your organization, your title, and then one of your biggest challenges related to grants. If you want to be specific, you can talk about prospect research. But yeah, let me know in the chat. All right. My name is Chandler Clayton. I help Instrumentl host these weekly grant workshops. So we host these with some best-selling authors, some expert educators, a lot of individuals within the grant writing and the nonprofit world. And together, Instrumentl has helped over 1,700, actually, I think as of today, over 1,800 nonprofits in finding, tracking, and managing their grants. And every day we're listening to what you are telling us in order to cater these workshops and develop some new ideas that, hopefully will help you with your grant journey. All right, I'm seeing some messages in the chat. So welcome Vanessa, welcome Cindy, welcome Patty Jean. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to start out with just a questionnaire. So go ahead and let me know in the chat with a simple yes or no if any of these resonate with you, okay? Do you ever feel unsure whether your organization is going after the right grant opportunities? Just give me a yes or a no. Awesome. Seeing some yeses. Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many opportunities out there. How do you know if you're going after the right one? All right, what about this one? Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the number of things that you have to do when it comes to grant seeking? I know, when I was writing grants, this was definitely something that applied to me. Yep, I'm seeing some yeses across the board here. Some emphasis on the yes. All right, what about this one? You ever feel discouraged because you've been rejected by funders before? I know, when you're writing grants, you're not always winning. It's a difficult reality, but it's something that is just part of the nature of grant writing. So I see sometimes I see a heck yes in there. Absolutely. All right. So have you ever thought to yourself, are grants worth all the effort? For any of those reasons? Well, I'm here to tell you with 100% certainty that the answer is yes. And I'll tell you why. So grants are worth it because foundation giving is second only to charitable giving when it comes to funding nonprofits. That means that foundation giving, which is largely grants, is your number 2 fundraising strategy behind, just getting your donations. So it's a large part of your overall fundraising goal. And then with that, private foundations actually represent the largest award source for nonprofit organizations. And with that, Instrumentl alone has 11,000 plus active grants, and we're adding about 100 every week. And right now, there are about 87,000 grant-making foundations in existence. So there are a ton of opportunities out there. So it's just a matter of, finding your strategy, nailing it down, developing your systems, and going after the right prospects. Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about why fit matters, number 1. And then we're going to talk over 10 different questions that we've put together that are going to help you actually rank your funders. So you're ranking those opportunities, making sure you're pursuing the best ones. And then we're going to talk about what is a decision matrix. When should you use it? And then how can you create your own? And then at the very end, we're actually going to dive in and start prioritizing some prospects. So we'll find some prospects, we'll run them through our decision matrix in order to figure out which are the best ones to pursue. Okay, so that's a roadmap of where we're going to go today. But we're going to get started with why does fit matter? Okay, well, why does it matter? Number 1, grants are extremely competitive. If you are in the grant world, you're already aware of this. Applying to any loose fit grants, it's going to drastically reduce your chances for success. So you want to make sure that you're only going after the best fits. With so many different opportunities, finding those good fit funders is going to help you focus on only those best options. and it's going to help you save time in the long run, which is, I know it's one of those issues that we're all facing in our day-to-day. And finally, prioritizing your prospects is ultimately going to save you that time, like I mentioned. All right, so today I want to emphasize setting up systems, because once you set up those systems, you're going to become more efficient in the long run. And then it's going to be overall easier to receive funding from your past opportunities. And what I mean by this is, with any opportunities that you're putting through this system, you're going to have a better idea of what's important to your organization, who fits that mold, and how to actually go after them. So, developing the system isn't only looking forward, but it's also looking backwards at what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past. And we'll get into that in a bit, in a little bit here. Okay. So why does it matter? Funders see thousands of applications, and only the best ones are going to make it past their initial scan. So you want to immediately stand out. Okay. That's probably one of the biggest goals here, is to help you figure out how to stand out. And then with that, foundations have their criteria that they're held to when it comes to funding. So it's important that you are only applying to, the organizations that you meet that criteria, as well as those that meet your own criteria. And then this graphic at the bottom, I think, is really important, because we don't often think of foundations as, stewards of capital, but that's ultimately what they are. The foundation is in charge of giving their money to the nonprofits, who are then putting that money back in the community. So foundations are looking for the best way to spend their money to create the biggest impact. And they do so by leveraging those nonprofits that are going to have that largest impact within their respective communities. So that's how I want to, move forward thinking about grants and thinking about foundations is, we're ultimately part of that puzzle of being those stewards of capital for our communities. Okay. So that, in short, is why fit is so important. So let's talk about, some questions that are going to help us actually refine our strategy. Okay, so our 10 questions, starting with a couple of grant RFP questions. RFP is request for proposal. These are questions such as, does this grant's project requirements and mission align with my own goals? So do we cover the same areas of work? Are we interested in the same areas of impact? Things such as that. Number 2, does my organization meet this opportunity's eligibility requirements? That is a really simple one. Most grant opportunities are going to explicitly state their eligibility requirements, who's eligible, who's ineligible. So with a quick scan, you're going to be able to determine whether or not you meet those. And that's going to help you save time, because you're not going to be going after any loose fit opportunities that you're automatically disqualified for. Okay. So considering those grant RFP questions, now we're going to move into some funder specific questions. So we're going to look at our funders' giving history. So when we're looking at their giving history, we're looking at things such as, how open are they to new grantees? So if we haven't worked with this funder before, what are the odds that we're actually going to get our foot in the door? We recommend, anywhere over a 30% openness to new grantee signals that it's going to be fairly doable to get your foot in the door. Below 30% shows that these funders typically only work with the same organizations that they've been working with for years past. So if you haven't worked with them before, it's going to be a little bit more difficult right off the bat. Another question to consider is your geographic location actually represented? So this is very important, because, if I'm a nonprofit in Utah and I'm looking at some opportunities, but I'm seeing that they are only funding, on the East Coast, they haven't funded anybody on the West, or maybe they only fund in a specific state. So maybe they only fund specifically in California, then that's going to show me that they probably aren't looking at too many organizations in Utah, because they're focused on different communities. Okay, so that's one thing that we can consider, and we can dial down right away to help us figure out whether it's a good fit or not. How closely do past grantees align with my own organization? That is extremely important, because we can actually view the list of past grantees from each funder. And so when we're looking through those, can we identify, at least 3 of these opportunities that are similar to mine? And what I mean by that is, when I'm looking through the past grantees, let's say that I'm a, after school tutoring program. And I'm looking through here and I'm only seeing opportunities that deal with, food security or arts. And that's just something that I don't naturally cover. Well, that's going to show me that they aren't funding organizations similar to mine. Whereas if I'm seeing a bunch of different, after school programs, different, education programs, that's going to show me that they already are represented. My work is already represented with this funder. And so it's a good opportunity to pursue. And then finally, our fourth question for funder giving history is, have new grantees historically received as much as repeat grantees? This is something that without looking through 990 data, you wouldn't be able to know. But looking through that, you would be able to figure out the different amount that they're allocating for new grantees versus repeat grantees. And how that's useful. Well, if I'm a new, this is my first time working with this funder, and I can view this and I can see that on average, they're giving about $10,000 less in their median grant amount to new grantees versus repeat grantees. Let's just say they're giving $10,000 to new grantees. They're giving $20,000 to repeat grantees. I, as a first-time, applicant, don't want to ask for that $20,000 amount because it's just not realistic. It's going to be a lot easier to actually be successful if I'm asking for that $10,000 amount, keeping in mind that for the future, if I do work with them for more than 1 year, I can start to increase my ask. Likewise, if I've been working with a funder for a few years at this point, and I'm still asking for the amount that they're giving to new funders, but we already have this solid relationship, that just shows me that I've been missing out on, asking for more. And that might be something that I refine in my future proposals. Okay. So at this stage, I think we're more than halfway through our questions. So I want to take a quick breather to make sure that there aren't any questions in the chat. So let me know. We do have a small group. So if you actually want to come off your mic today, that's perfectly fine. Let me know if you have any questions, and then we'll dive into the second half of our questions. Okay. Not seeing any questions, so I'm going to keep on moving. All right. So our next two questions are going to specifically pertain to giving median. So we're looking at things such as, is the giving median worth going after? So if we're trying to raise $250,000 for our program, and we're seeing that this grant, historically, the median amount is $500, probably not worth our time, right? Especially if we're a small team, we need to make the most out of every grant that we're going after. So if we're trying to raise that $250,000, we might not even want to pursue any grants that are below $5,000. It's just not worth our time. And then, do historical giving trends show positive growth? This is really important because this is going to be our insight into the foundation itself. And it's going to show us whether there's any internal turmoil. So if there is a negative trend and they're giving less and less year over year, that's going to show that there's something going on. And for some reason, they're giving less, and it's probably not going to be wise to get involved, knowing that there's a high likelihood that, in future years, my funding could be cut. So we're going to try to find those with positive growth, showing that they are more open, spending more on grants, opening or welcoming new grantees, things like that. So that's what I mean by giving trends. And then finally, we have two more questions. Our final two questions deal with internal considerations. So these are specifically about, your team. So at your nonprofit or your organization, you want to consider things such as, does your team have the bandwidth to actually take on the proposal? And likewise, do they actually have the bandwidth to tackle the reporting requirements? You're probably familiar, some proposals are easier than others. So some will have 2 steps, send a letter of interest and then, send your application. Some will have, 10 steps. You have to send a CV or resume for every member of your team. You need a recommendation from the university, things like that. So if I'm a very small team, or if I'm just getting started in the grants world, I'm not going to want to go after those ones with a lengthy process, knowing that it's just going to bog me down and it's time that I'm not going to be able to spend going after other opportunities, right? So I'm going to find those easy processes, and then I'm not ending it with the proposal. I'm looking at the reporting requirements as well, because you're probably familiar, but after you win the grant, you're not done. You still have to report. And with that, if they're asking for, metrics that you don't have systems in place to track, it's just going to ultimately, it's going to hamper your relationship with that funder because you're not going to have accurate reporting. You're not going to be able to actually showcase the impact that you're having. And it's also just going to be a strain on your own team. And then our second question for our own team is, do we have any connections to the funder? So we want to reach out to all the members on our team, key people in our board, key individuals in our community, see if we have any connections, because the one thing that helps in the grant process more than anything else is relationships. That's coming from experience. And so when you build relationships, you're more likely to succeed in getting your grants. It's as simple as that. And so if you're able to find these funders and connect with them before even sending your proposal, that's just going to help you stand out, that much more. Okay. So those are our 10 questions that we're going to consider. I mean, there's a ton more out there. You're welcome to, add your own considerations, but those are just 10 that we like to think of right off the bat to help refine our overall strategy. Okay, so keeping those in mind, now we're going to dive into, the actual decision matrix aspect of this. So what is a decision matrix? Well, in short, it's a prioritization tool. So a decision matrix helps teams evaluate and prioritize a list of options. You can use weighted criteria to evaluate options against each other. And this is a great way of, taking what's important to you and reflecting it in your decisions. So if we look at this graphic here, we have all of our criteria that are important to our organization. We can add weights to each one based on how important they are. So, not everything shares equal importance. For instance, it might be more important to my organization to be aligned with the project goals rather than, going after specific grant amounts. Similarly, and then once we establish this, we can plug in our solutions and actually have, our total benefit. So we have a hard number that we can use in order to prioritize. Okay. I do see a question in the chat. So I'm going to take a look at this. Vanessa asks, while working with a new nonprofit, how would you respond to a funder requesting a financial audit when the nonprofit is just starting? So that's an interesting question. I'd say as a new nonprofit, it's probably going to be difficult because your systems might not be in place yet. So I would say that this funder is probably one of those that might be more difficult to work with. But in the long run, what I would say here is when you're going through your financial audit, you're going to want to systemize it. And what I mean by that is you're going to want to take all of your learnings and make it easier to replicate next time. So if this happens again, while you might not have those systems in place while you're just starting, it's important that your first time through, you're developing those so that, the next funder that comes through and wants a financial audit, you already have something in place where you can just either pull it or you can just add whatever criteria you need and then pull it from there. So that's my suggestion. That's very broad. If you want to chat after, there's probably some more specific insight that we can dive into, but that would be my broad answer to that, Vanessa. All right. So back to our decision matrix tools. Our first one, I want to give you a few different examples, is the Eisenhower 2x2 matrix. So you may have seen these back in the day. I know these always came up when I was back in school. These are just different ways to help you make decisions, in short. So the Eisenhower 2x2 matrix is probably one of the most simple tools. It's really good for prioritizing tasks based on importance and urgency. It's not quite as good for anything that deals with complex issues or multiple criteria. So in short, what you're doing here is you're figuring out what's important, what's urgent, what do I need, if it's important and urgent, shows that I need to do it right now. If it's, important, but it's not urgent, I need to plan out for it. If it's not important, but it's urgent, then I can delegate it to another member of my team, knowing that, it's not as important to have all the nitty-gritty details. And if it's not important and not urgent, well, you can just drop it. Okay, so that's a really simple system. Getting a little bit more advanced, you've probably seen this, especially when you're in school, or if you were doing any writing projects or things like that. This is our simple rubric. And so these were, like I said, largely used in the education sector. But what they're really good for is prioritizing tasks based on predetermined values. So you are able to, group certain criteria together and then assign value to it. And so it's really easy to input, a whole lot of different, so let's just say you're inputting papers. It's easy to input a whole lot of different options and then get, values that reflect an accurate, grading system. What it's not as good for is dealing with a lot of different criteria or any criteria that might be difficult to quantify. That's where this is going to come short and where you're going to want to, pursue one of these other methods, specifically the weighted decision matrix. So this is what we're going to talk about most of today because it's fairly easy to set up. You can get pretty personal or you can get pretty specific with what you're putting in. And then it's really good for prioritizing. So it's great for blending organization specific criteria and using weighted inputs to rank a set of inputs. It's not as good for dynamically changing as time goes on. The only reason is because you will need to change it as well as change your weights with it. So if you're, changing the criteria that you have in there, you're also going to need to change your weights. And with that, it can be a lengthier process. But if you do have, your set criteria, so if you're going through prospecting, it's pretty effective because you're usually going to use the same criteria for each opportunity. And so you can input the weights based on that and then have a great system of inputting, your opportunities, getting your values and determining based on that. Okay. So with that in mind, that was just a glimpse into them. Now I'm going to talk about when you should actually use them. Okay. So you're going to want to use a decision matrix when your team has limited bandwidth. So if you are, strained for time, like a lot of us are, and you need help determining which will be the most rewarding, which opportunity, it's a great system for that. If you want to compare several different options against, your internally determined criteria, great for that. If you're looking to be more strategic and efficient in your grant strategy, this is one of the easiest ways to do it. Very easy to set up. We're going to go through it today. And from there, you can, cater it to whatever you want. So today we're going to scratch the surface. But what I really want for you is to take this, and we do have a resource guide that I'll share with you at the end that, goes into detail, helps you create on your own. But I want you to create this for your own organization and then start inputting some values and see how much time it is saving you. So start seeing, whether you're winning opportunities based on it, refining it, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so without any further ado, let's actually create one. Okay, so step one, we're going to want to determine what to consider. So what's the overall use for this tool? So most of us here are using this tool to help determine, our go versus no-go funding opportunities. There could be other uses for it, determining which of your opportunities is the most replicable, which proposals you can use time and time again. But I think for most of us here, it's probably going to help us with determining which prospects to actually pursue. And so that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the presentation. And then we want to consider who's actually going to use it. So grant writers are probably going to have some different criteria than your development directors or even your executive directors, because we're all looking for different things. So for instance, a grant writer might be looking at, that proposal process. How difficult is that? Whereas, an executive director probably isn't as concerned with that. They're more concerned with, maybe the amount they're getting out of it. A development director might be, more concerned with what funding area does it cover. So like, does it cover general operating expenses, things like that. So important to, before you even go about setting it up, determine what's important to your own organization and to your role specifically. And then that's going to help you shape it. Okay. So step two is going to be actually utilizing your past data. So if you're just starting out and you're just getting this data, that's okay. You can, change it as you go along. But if you have actually sent some proposals, you've won some, you've lost some, well, you're going to want to take a look at all of the proposals that you've won as well as those that you've lost. And when I say this is because you want to figure out, what are some of the reasons or what are some of the key characteristics of those that I've won and what are some of the key characteristics of some of those that I've lost. For instance, maybe I'm seeing that I'm winning a lot of grants that are specifically, you know, focused on my geographic area. I'm losing a lot of grants that are, you know, focused on larger grant amounts, something like that. Okay. And then you're going to want to review and determine the most important factors. So like I said, you know, whether you didn't meet the eligibility requirements, whether your geographic location wasn't historically represented, whether you have a loose alignment to those project goals. These are all things that you're going to want to take a look through and consider when you're developing your decision matrix. Okay. And with all that in mind, you're going to actually go through and develop your criteria. Okay, so I'll show you some, you know, some set criteria that we've established for this presentation, but I want you to take this back, take it home with you, and then figure out what's important. So what are the most important criteria for deciding when and when not to pursue a grant? So is it more important for you to have a larger median grant amount? Is it more important to have that alignment with past grantees, alignment with project goals, whatever it may be? And I want you to think beyond just the grant. So we want to be thinking through all those 10 questions that I mentioned. So not just the ones that have to do with grant amounts, funder giving history, anything like that. Think about your internal bandwidth. You know, a lot of us said that time is an issue for us. So it doesn't make sense to, you know, have all these criteria and not even touch on time. Also, I see a question about getting the info later. Yes, there will be a recording as well as the slides. And there will be a resource as well that will walk through all of this. Okay. So the final step here with developing your criteria is to be honest with yourself. If you're not okay, or if you're okay not aligning that closely with the project's goals, as long as the opportunity, you know, gives you your grant amount that you're looking for, that's fine. Be honest with yourself. Prioritize that. You know, you don't have to, you know, think of it like setting yourself up on a pedestal. You don't have to do that. You know, be realistic. Is it important that, you know, for a lot of us, it's probably important that we're getting that grant amount that we're looking for. So we might be pursuing opportunities that are looser fits in order to spend less time going after, you know, those smaller median amounts. Okay. So with that, I'm going to share a link in the chat, and we're actually going to go through this together of actually creating a decision matrix, a weighted decision matrix. So go ahead and click that link, and that link should take you to this template, which I'm going to pull up on my screen. All right. So it should take you to a page like this. Let me know if you're having any issues. And on this first page, it's going to show you, you know, some guidelines. It's going to be a description that's going to help you understand what you're looking at. But I'm going to just dive in. So if we click use the template. Oh, it says you need access. Let me share sorry, that must have been a restricted. Here we go. Let's share this. So hopefully that won't require that access. Okay. All right. So now I see some people are in here. Perfect. So we're going to look around in here. While we're all working through this, I'm going to send an updated link later so that we're all working out of different templates, so that, you know, if I'm editing this and somebody else edits it, we're not overlapping. But for now, I'm just going to walk through this and show you what I'm looking at. So I'm going to enlarge my screen a little bit. Okay. So at the top here, I have those 10 questions that I brought up earlier, the main things that we're going to be considering. So if you need to recap, those are here for you. But what I want to focus on is what this actually looks like. So we have a column for our funding opportunities, right? Very simple. We have all of our criteria that I'm considering. So I pulled all 10 of them up here. And then we have our criteria weights. So this is where we are assigning weights, is right above it. So let's just say, let's work through this. If we're looking at, you know, does this grant's project requirements and missions align with my own goals? On a scale of, so the weights that we're going to put in are going to add up to 1. That is important to note. So for instance, we have 10 different options. If we assign them equal weights, they would all be 0.1 in their weight, because that would ultimately add up to 1. Okay, so I want to work through this with you. So how important, message in the chat, is it that the grants project requirements and mission align with my own goals on a scale of 0 to 1? 1, very, very important. 7. So yeah, let's do a scale of 0 to 10, and then we'll go from there. Make it a little bit easier. 9, 7, 9. Okay. 9, 10. So I'm seeing that this is pretty important, right? So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this a weight of 0.5. And 0.5, you might be asking, that's only half of it. But when we're considering 10 different things, if this is, worth half, if this is worth half of our consideration, that's pretty large, right? Okay, so let's move on to this next one. Does my organization meet this opportunity's eligibility requirements? So how important are the eligibility requirements, do you think? Pretty important as well. Awesome. So, so I see these are very important. Let's add another 0.5. At this point, we're already at 1, but we'll keep going and then we'll refine from there. So how open is this funder to new grantees? How important is the openness? Also very important. Okay. So let's say 0.5. I'm saying that what I'm saying here, I see maybe it's a 0.4. I see somebody says it's not as important. What I'm showing here is that these two opportunities are equally as important. This one is just a little bit less. Okay. So now, is my organization's geographic location represented historically? How important is geographic location to us? Kind of middle of the road. Okay, I see kind of mid, maybe a little bit higher than middle. So let's say 0.3 for that. How closely do past grantees align to my own organizations? So looking at past grantees. Okay, so maybe a little bit higher than the geographic area. Okay, let's keep working. So how about have new grantees historically received as much as past grantees? So looking at the difference in amounts. Is that important to us? Okay, so I see that this one's probably less important. Okay, so let's assign this 0.05, knowing that it's less important. All right, is the median giving amount worth going after? So looking at the median giving amount, how important is that? That might be the most important thing. So I see for a lot of us, that's the most important thing. For some others, it's still pretty important. So I'm going to list that as a 0.6, just noting that that's probably our most important so far. Okay. What about, do historical giving trends show positive growth? So looking at the funder and their giving history, seeing those trends. So a little bit important. Somebody says it's very important. We'll say middle of the road for this one. I'm going to assign a 0.2 to this. Okay, does my team have the bandwidth to take on this proposal? So internal bandwidth, how important is that to us? Very important, especially the first thing that we saw here with the challenges was time. And so I could see this being extremely important. All right, so let's put this as a 0.6 as well. And then our last one, does my team have the bandwidth to tackle the reporting requirements? So more than the proposal, looking at the reporting requirements, very important. All right, we're going to assign a 0.6 to that too. So now we have these weights, but they're not perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at these, and what I want to do is I want to make sure that all of these add up to 1. So as you can see right now, they don't. They add up to like 4.1. But what I'm going to do is I see that these 3 values are my highest, followed closely by these 2, then here, then here, then here, here, and here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign all of my 0.6. I'm going to assign those as a 0.15, 0.15. And I'll talk about why I'm doing this, or yeah, 0.15, 0.15, 0.15. And then for our 0.5s, we'll assign, a 0.1, 0.1. All right, for my 0.4. So now let's see what we have. So, 0.15 plus 0.15 is 0.3, 0.45, 0.55, 0.65, So we have 0.35 left to allocate. All right, so if you're not following, this is actually highlighted on that first tab of this. So the intro to the spreadsheet is going to spell out, why we're looking at this. Okay, so now we have 0.35 left to work with. So let's assign, 0.08 to this. Let's assign 0.06. This is a little more, so 0.07. And then this one. Okay, so positive growth, that's not that important to us. So let's see where we're at with everything. We are at 1.11. All right, so this is going to be worth 0.05. That's our least important. All right, so now where are we at? We're at 0.96, so we have 0.04 to allocate. I want to spread these out a little more. So I'm going to say 0.09, 0.08, keep that at 0.06. And then I want one of these options to be my most important. So put in the chat what the single most important is, and I want to give it just a little bit of a boost to showcase that, okay? So which of these considerations? Is it the reporting requirements, the proposal? What do we think? Okay. Funder aligns with my own goals. Okay, perfect. So funder aligns with my own goals right here. So I'm going to allocate everything that I have left, which is, we'll take this to 0.12. And when I look through this, we have a sum of 1. Okay. So now that we're at a sum of 1, we can actually work with this. And we can refine these criteria as much as we need to. So if we're looking at this and we're like, is the openness to grantees really that close in importance to how closely past grantees align with my own organization? If we don't think so, we can expand that and adjust accordingly. But for now, it's at 1. And so what I'm going to want to do is start actually inputting some opportunities. Okay. So we have some time. Let's pull some actual opportunities. So I'm going to share one more link with you. All right. Actually, I have it in my notes here. So give me just 2 seconds and I'll share that with you. So for this step, if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and click this link, and it's going to help you to sign up for a 2-week free trial and no strings attached to Instrumentl. And that's what I'm going to be working out of as we find our funding opportunities. Okay. So feel free to do that. And what you're going to see after you set up your project is a tab like this. Okay. So this is going to be where I have all of my different prospects, my different opportunities to go after. Excuse me. Okay. So let's just look through it. So if we're working on this air quality project, let's look at this first opportunity, this modernizing environmental public health. So better yet, let's actually get a real example from the audience since we have some time. So I saw some people worked for, let me scroll back up. I see somebody's a grant writer. We see Central Missouri Community Action Agency. Okay, so working on, oh, Deborah just gave me an example. So recreation swimming, I'm gonna go with that one. Okay, so if we are, looking at some different opportunities, let's look up recreation swimming. So if we're looking up, different opportunities, here we see some past recipients. So what I can do here, well, this isn't a great example, but what I can do if I find a good one is actually look at who's funding them. And that will give me a good thing to go off of. I don't have that for now, but I do see somebody said homeless shelter. So let's just go off of that since I do have an example of those. So our matches tab, we have this AARP Community Challenge Grant. So let's put this through our system. So AARP Community Challenge Grant. Okay, so as we're working through this, does this grant's project requirements and mission align to my own goals? So let's take a look. So if I'm looking through here, I see the overview. I can skim this real quick and I can see whether or not, it's closely aligned with what I'm looking for. So if I see key things such as create vibrant public places, transportation mobility options, whatever it may be, let's just say, for example, we're going to be pretty loose on this because I'm going to, give you all these tools to get very specific on your own. I just want to show you how to set it up. So let's just say that, this is pretty closely aligned, not perfect. Let's assign it an 8. Okay. So as you see, our final score and our grade are adjusted accordingly. So we're giving this an 8. Let's say eligibility requirements. Let's take a look at them. So our eligibility requirements, it has to be a 501c3, 501c4, and 501c6. Government entity can't be any of this. So let's say we meet that. Very simple. We'll assign it a 10. We either meet it or we don't. Okay. So it's already changing our grade. How open is this funder to new grantees? So let's take a look. If we go to our 990 report here, we have all that information for you. So we've pulled this within Instrumentl, and we're able to quickly, glance through this. So we're looking at openness to new grantees, 48%. So just so you know, anything above 30% is good. And what you're going to commonly see is things around, anywhere from 20 to 40%. So 48% is one of the highest that I've actually seen. So this is a really great open opportunity if you are a new grantee. So I'm going to assign it a 10. Okay. Now we're going to talk about, is my organization's geographic location represented historically? So let's go back into our 990 data here. And you may have seen it, but here we have our graph of past grantees. And so let's say, let's say Albuquerque, New Mexico, because I see that in the examples from Deborah. So if we're looking here, New Mexico, there are 8 different opportunities here out of 792. I would say it's represented, but it's probably not represented as strongly as, say, California, Texas, Florida, New York. So we'll assign it a 6 to show that it's represented, but it's not represented the best. Okay. And then let's look at how closely do past grantees align to my own organizations. Okay. How we're going to do that is going back to our tab. We can look at it's right here, the past recipients. So these are the past grantees. And here we can see, let's look at New Mexico specifically. Again, if I'm going fast, this is all going to be recorded and sent to you. So don't worry, you can always follow on your own. Plus the worksheet that I'm going to send you is going to make this extremely easy for you, okay? I just want to make sure that we get through a few different examples so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we can see a lot of the past recipients were community colleges. We got this health trust, this college retiree, medical services, another community college. So if we're a community college and we're looking at this opportunity, this is a 10. Like, this is a great fit. If we are not, let's just say that we're not a community college, we're probably not that represented here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, this is probably, a 1. We're really not that well represented. Okay. So moving on, have new grantees historically received as much as past grantees? Well, let's take a look. So if we look at our different sizes, we can see that right here. So new grantees are historically getting about $60,000, while repeat grantees are getting a whopping $95,621. So that's a big difference. That's 35,000 more. So I'm going to say that's a pretty big difference. So we'll say they have not historically received as much. So probably we'll say a 3. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but not that great. And if you're wondering to yourself, how do I know, what to put in here? Once you go through it a few times, you'll get it down. So it just takes a couple rounds of practice and repetition, and then you'll be a master. Okay, so moving forward, is the median giving amount worth going after? Well, let's take a look. So the median giving amount, $60,000, that's pretty high. Regardless of what we're going for, that's a pretty high amount. I'm going to say that's probably a 10. A lot of these amounts are for $5,000 or less. And so when I see that $60,000, that shows that that's a great opportunity. That's going to be, the time it's going to take me to do 12 of those $5,000 grants, I can spend on this one $60,000 grant. Okay. Do historical giving trends show positive growth? Let's take a look. So that's going to be, if we scroll on up, we can see giving trends here. And so we see there is this big drop from 2010 to 2011, and then it kind of stabilized. What I see here is that it's actually been going up over the last year, or 2019 is the last data we have for this. But from 2018 to 2019, there's a huge jump. And so I'm going to say that it's actually a good representation. I think this was probably long enough ago that we don't need to, really consider it. We're looking closer at this right here, and it shows that big jump. So as long as that jump continues, that's going to be a 10. Okay. Does my team have the bandwidth to take on this proposal? Well, let's see what they're asking for. So if we go back to our overview page, we can see, probably have to actually visit the funder's website to see more about this opportunity. But I don't see anything on here that shows me immediately that I'm going to have, resumes for my everybody on my team, things like that. The eligibility and ineligibility requirements are pretty simple. So I'm going to say that this one's, probably one of those simpler tasks. So I'm going to assign it a 10. Okay. And then finally, does my team have the bandwidth to tackle the reporting requirements? I won't know that until I actually look at the funder's website. But let's just say that we do. I'll assign that a 10 as well. And that actually makes a big jump. So we see, with all of this in mind, this gives us a final score of 8.45 or a B. That's meaningless with one opportunity, right? So let's add one more. Let's add our, let me just make sure we have data. We're going to add one more opportunity. I just want to make sure that we have one where we can quickly work through. This looks like a good one. So let's add this COVID-19 Adjust East Bay Response Fund. Okay, so COVID-19. I'm just going to put COVID-19 fund. Okay. So here, I'm going to get a little bit arbitrary here. I'm not going to actually go through like I did that first time, just because I want to have time to leave you with your resources and answer any questions you may have. But let's just say, that it is a pretty loose alignment. So it's maybe like a 4. Do we meet the eligibility requirements? Yes. How open are they to new funders? Maybe kind of middle of the pack. So we'll assign it a 5. Is your organization's geographic location represented? Let's say that it's really strongly represented. Let's assign it a 10. How closely do past grantees align to my own organization? Let's say it's a lot of very similar opportunities. So let's give it like an 8. Have new grantees historically received as much? Let's say it's pretty close, almost the same amount. We'll assign it an 8 as well. Is the median amount worth going after? This one I'll actually look at because it's so easy to find. So the median amount is 20,000. So I would say, yeah, absolutely. That's probably going to be another 10. Or it's not that $60,000 amount. So we'll assign it a 9. Historical giving trends. Let's say there is something going on. So let's say there is a negative trend here. We'll assign it a low amount. Let's say, let's say this proposal has a lot more parts to it. So maybe it's like a 6. It's going to take us some time. And then they have a lot of reporting requirements. So let's maybe assign that a 7. And what we have here is right off the bat, we have all these different inputs based on our criteria. But when we put it all together, we get this snapshot that shows us right off the bat that this first opportunity is going to be a better fit. Okay. And so, obviously that second example, I didn't get very specific with, because I do want to, have enough time to address any questions. But as you're going through this, you can keep adding your opportunities, adding your values. And at the end, a lot of us are probably going to have a list of, anywhere from 10 to 100 opportunities at any given time. And with that, we can, sort based on the final score, this grade column is great. It's just to give you a snapshot. So if you only want to go after opportunities that are Bs or above, that's one way that you can go about it. If it doesn't matter as much, if you're really just looking at the highest scores, that's another way that you can go about it. But what I want to emphasize here is that based on these different criteria and the weights that we assigned, we're getting this final amount based on our inputs that is showing us a snapshot of how important this opportunity is, right? So if I'm looking through this and I have, 100 opportunities, but I see that I only have maybe, 10 opportunities that are above an 8 in their final score, well, I'm going to go after those 10 opportunities. I'm going to wait for those other opportunities until I have some additional free time. And so that, in short, is how we're going to use this tool. Like I said, you can personalize it to yourself. The intro on the front page is going to have some great instructions on how you can do that on your own. The key things you're going to want to make sure you do here is to make sure that you are keeping your weights assigned so they add up to 1. That's very important. That just helps with the final calculations. And then making sure that your inputs here are on a scale of 1 to 10. And obviously, if you want to create your own, you can change that. That's just how this specific one is set up. Okay. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. I know that was a lot. I'm really hoping that this workbook that I'm going to give you helps you if you have any lingering questions. But with that, I do want to leave you with a couple things. So I'm going to re-input this link. So as you saw, it was extremely easy to pull that data because Instrumentl visualizes it for you. Otherwise, what you would be dealing with is something like, find a good example. Some of these will just have a PDF attached. So if we look down, not a great example. Anyway, some of them will just have a PDF and you have to scroll through it. The visualized data is really helpful for being able to do this and do it quickly, which is that time-saving tip that we're all looking for. So go ahead and create your trial, play around with it. And if you have any specific questions, you can book a call with Karen, and she is going to help you, make your account extremely personalized. So whatever you're looking for, she's going to be able to help you cater it to your own, organization, your own nonprofit. If you're a grant writer, we can also set up different projects to, specifically cater to your different clients, things like that. I do want to leave you with our 3 learning takeaways. So number 1, prioritizing grant opportunities can save you time, like I've mentioned 100 times, and it can help you be more successful with your grant applications. Number 2, prioritizing your funding opportunities can be systemized by developing this weighted criteria and utilizing a prioritization tool, whether that is this decision, this weighted decision matrix that we've gone through, whether you want a simpler version like the Eisenhower 2x2, just to figure out, do I go after it or not? And then finally, Instrumentl is always here to help you turbocharge your grant strategy. And you can join us for more of these free trainings. We're always putting them together. So we're coming up with some different areas. We have a very exciting virtual summit coming up on the 29th and 30th of March, where we're going to be giving away hundreds of dollars in prizes, hundreds and hundreds of pages in free resources. We're going to have an Ask Me Anything with an expert panel of grant writers and nonprofit executives. So it's going to be a great event. Join for that. Feel free to, take a look at our calendar for any upcoming events. And then finally, if you want to follow up with me, here's all of my information, as well as those promo codes from the very beginning. All right, so I'll let you jot that down. This will also be included in the follow-up. But this is the main thing that I want to be sure to give you. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the chat. So this is how you get our freebie, which is the ultimate guide to prioritizing prospects in 7 easy steps. So it's going to go through what we did today, but it's actually going to allow you to, on your own, create that criteria, develop your weights, assign your different opportunities, and then get your ultimate list of prioritized prospects. Okay, So just go ahead and click that link. Go ahead and fill out that feedback form by Friday, end of day, and you'll be able to get that. We do want to leave you with one more resource. So this is our 10 best lessons from 10 grant writing experts. We put together 28 pages from some of our expert partners, such as Dr. Bev Browning, who literally wrote Grants for Dummies, and Meredith Noble, who has a great grant writing course online. And this summarizes about 10 plus hours of our grant workshops. So it's a great, great tool if you're just getting started out, or even if you're down the road just with your proposals. To be eligible, all you have to do, a couple more steps, just rank 3 funding opportunities. So we ranked 2 today. Go ahead and rank 3 on your own, take a screenshot of it, and then email it to me at chandler@instrumentl.com. Okay, and that's how you can get that one. Finally, if you know of anybody else who could benefit from one of these, feel free to always email me at chandler@instrumentl.com. And with that, we have just a couple of minutes. So if anybody has any questions, now would be a great time for those. All right. And if we don't have any more questions,